0 during the 300,000 years since the end of the soul demon chaos. It was a true era without saints. 300,000 years ago, countless ultimate saint experts that were renowned throughout the entire great world had fallen during that chaos. It was the same for all saints who had fallen. After several tens of thousands of years, the vast and mighty heaven and earth origin chi that had been stirred up by the great battle finally calmed down. Some of the favored children of heaven began a new journey. They broke through the shackles of the heaven and earth and became saints. They rose up like bamboo shoots after a rain. Everything was heading towards a normal path. The saint heaven realm was different from the other realms. It was a realm that was formed by the saint domain and the heaven domain. It represented an even more mysterious and unfathomable realm, even during the era when the soul demon was wreaking havoc. Here is the least affected. The Saint Heaven Gate was one of the top sects in the Saint Heaven realm. No one could shake it. Countless geniuses were as powerful as a river, and there were countless of them. A young man sat on a cliff with a worried expression on his face. He looked at the endless sea of clouds in front of him, and only sighed after a long while. Half of the young man's hair was black and the other half was white. Within his eyes, the whites of his eyes and pupils were like a round disc that would occasionally mix and scatter. It was extremely strange. Swoosh! The young man suddenly stood up. There was a hint of anger on his handsome face. He threw the scroll in his hand forcefully and cursed. Go to hell! What in the world is wrong with this young master's constitution? The furious curses resounded throughout the entire cliff, and no one responded. Sect masters of the divine sky gate, please. Point me the way. After venting his anger, the young man fell to his knees with a thud. 2 streams of tears flowed out from his eyes, and his brows were filled with pain. In the Saint Heaven Gate, where geniuses were everywhere, his talent wasn't considered outstanding, but he was still in the middle level. Before he stepped into the monarch cultivation, his body had undergone a sudden change, and it seemed like the cultivation technique he was cultivating couldn't be contained within his body. It immediately dissipated, and what remained was. This was the only body that could no longer cultivate any cultivation technique. The sea of clouds in front of him moved, and swept up like a tornado. In an instant, it turned into a cloud wave that shot into the sky, and it shook the heavens and the earth. The young man's expression changed drastically. He stood up and was about to escape. This was a taboo of the divine sky gate. When the sea of clouds rose, the divine sky gate would move, and anyone who got caught up in it would die without a doubt. The wave of clouds was like a fierce tiger, and it didn't give the young man any time to escape. It instantly devoured him. Several decades later, in the Mingan divine domain. Outside the Heaven Divine Mountain, a young man in a shabby gray robe glanced at the majestic mountains in front of him. He smiled disdainfully and said in a clear voice, I am the Sacred Lord, and I will definitely stand proudly in the long river of history and enter the Heaven Divine Mountain. As soon as these words left his mouth, countless experts in the surroundings burst into laughter. This guy whose hair was black and white simply did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. The young man ignored the laughter of the crowd and left. In a few steps, he disappeared from everyone's eyes. It was another 5,000 years ceremony. While everyone was gathered outside the Heaven Divine Mountain, waiting for the few spots to be snatched, a yin-yang origin chi chain suddenly blasted out from the space, blocking everyone in front of the mountain. Who doesn't know the difference between life and death? Among this group of people, there were even 2 supreme saints. In the current era, supreme saints were invincible. What they pursued was nothing more than advancing further and becoming famous in the Heaven Divine Mountain. This was a great opportunity for them. An old man stepped out. His aura shook the entire Mingan divine domain, causing everyone to tremble in fear. Swoosh! A black and white origin chi light blade passed through the spatial zone. This supreme saint did not even have the slightest reaction before he died completely without any signs of life. Before everyone could cry out in alarm, a somewhat skinny figure walked out from within the space. The person, whose black and white hair was scattered, swept his gaze across everyone present. It's you! Some of the mighty figures who had come to Heaven Divine Mountain 5,000 years ago finally reacted. They were greatly shocked. The young man who had spoken so arrogantly back then had actually appeared in such a domineering manner today. My name is Sacred Lord Yin Yang. The Heaven Divine Mountain will be my dojo in the future. I will establish the Yin Yang sect and take charge of the Heaven Divine Mountain. The young man's voice was low and deep, as if it was the voice of an era. After he finished speaking, the young man stepped into the Heaven Divine Mountain. The bright light in the depths of the Heaven Divine Mountain shook the entire Mingan Divine Domain. Not long after that, the young man walked out safely, looking down on the world. The young man was in the Mingan Divine Domain, and he was in charge of the Yin-Yang sect. In the past 100 years, all those who refused to accept the challenge had joined the fight. All of them had suffered a crushing defeat, and none of them were a match for him. 100 years later, the young man went into the depths of the Middle Domain, as if he was searching for something. After a few years, he left with an expressionless face. After that, he entered the capital of chaos and stayed there for a few decades. After that, he traveled across all the domains and stood in the middle of the sea of clouds in the Saint Heaven realm's Saint Heaven Gate. In the next 100,000 years, the youth gradually aged. In these 100,000 years, the Yin-Yang Saint Lord had ruled for 100,000 years. The Saint Lord went to the barbarian region at the end of his life and entered the land where the god of berserkers had fallen. As he left, he looked into the void and was silent for a long time. He stepped in and never came out again. Everyone in the world knew that the Sacred Lord had died. Many experts who had been suppressed by the Sacred Lord for their entire lives sighed, but they were also secretly delighted. The Sacred Lord had been independent for 100,000 years, and now he had finally passed away in meditation. The great world was finally going to return to the era of the king's hegemony. That name was an existence that no one could look up to, and it had become the nightmare in the hearts of countless people. Tens of thousands of years later, the Yin-Yang Gate had fallen apart. The Yin and Yang Scroll was split into Yin Scroll and Yang Scroll, and it was still one of the famous cultivation techniques of the Great World. There was no longer a need to investigate whether a Sacred Lord was still alive. In today's era, it was not necessarily a bad time to chase after a group of strong men. 2 inches someone really came. The moment the figure appeared, Xiao Yan's heart suddenly jumped to his throat. To be able to rush out of the spatial zone, it was undoubtedly a heavenly sovereign. Even though he had already killed a heavenly sovereign before, he still felt a trace of pressure if he wanted to snatch food from the tiger's mouth of an expert of this level. In a place surrounded by enemies from all sides, to use all of his skills to fight with a heavenly sovereign level alchemist was definitely not something that Lei Xingyun and Xiao Yan could do. Xiao Yan's eyes narrowed, and he was just about to launch an unexpected attack. This black shadow didn't seem to be aiming at the dark light cauldron. Instead, it flew out of the spatial zone like a cannonball. Kiera. When he saw the face of the black shadow, Xiao Yan was startled. Without any hesitation, he took a step forward and appeared in the path of Kiera's flying back, firmly catching her. "What happened to you?" He looked at the pale girl in his arms. Xiao Yan's face flashed with surprise. He could feel that the former had suffered a serious injury. Kiera should have been with Qi Zhang. How could she have suffered such a serious injury? "Oh!" Kiera, who was caught by Xiao Yan, instinctively cried out in alarm and wanted to get up to dodge. She was first stunned when she heard Xiao Yan's voice. She widened her eyes and saw the latter's face clearly. Only then did she let down all her defenses. "What's wrong with you? Where's your brother?" Xiao Yan carefully placed Kiera on the ground. He looked at the thin and weak little girl in front of him, which made people's heart ache, and said in a deep voice. Kiera fled in a miserable manner with the spatial energy. She definitely did not do it without a reason. The biggest possibility was that they encountered an enemy that was difficult to resist. "Big brother, he. Hearing Xiao Yan's question, Kiera suddenly came back to her senses. 2 lines of clear tears instantly flowed out of her eyes. She looked at Xiao Yan with teary eyes and sobbed. "Brother suffered a serious injury in order to let me escape." As expected, Xiao Yan's heart sank, but he didn't know how to open his mouth. In this place, if one didn't have powerful strength, one's life and death wouldn't be in one's control. Those old monsters who had been in seclusion for many years weren't good men and women. "Xiao Yan, can you save my brother? I beg you." Grabbing Xiao Yan's arm, Kiera's eyes were filled with tears, and her face was filled with pleading. Hearing this, Xiao Yan could not help but feel troubled. His time was pressing and he did not get a single herb. Did he still have time to waste? After pondering for a moment, Xiao Yan turned his gaze and saw the dark light cauldron beside him. His expression changed, and he fiercely gritted his teeth. He pulled Kiera up and wiped away the tears on her pretty face. He said in a deep voice, "Do you know where your brother is?" Bring me there. Kiera blushed instinctively when her face was brushed by Xiao Yan's finger. Hearing the former's words, she couldn't help but shed tears of joy and hastily nodded. I know. I can follow the traces in the spatial zone and find that place. As she spoke, she seemed to have made up her mind. She immediately grabbed Xiao Yan's hand and flew away. Little bastard. Seeing Xiao Yan and Kiera leaving, the old man appeared in the dense forest with an ashen face. He glared at them. Glancing at the star sky tablets on the side, he put away the dark light cauldron and angrily said, Can I leave now? Whatever. Glancing at the old man, the star sky tablet expressionlessly said. The old man coldly snorted and was about to leave when the star sky tablet's voice sounded once again. You came from that empire in Middle Domain? Hearing this, the old man's footsteps stopped and he pondered for a moment. He said coldly, Luokang Dynasty. Luokang. Luokang City is far from Taiyang Mountain. Do you know anything about the ancient emperor? The star sky tablet's tone was cold, but when it mentioned the ancient emperor, it calmed down a little. Ancient sovereign. When he heard this name, the old man's face couldn't help but twitch, and he said angrily, The three great majestic empires and the ancient sovereign don't have any friendly relationship. However, ever since the ancient sovereign came to Middle Domain, he didn't even meet the three royal lords. He directly occupied Taiyang Mountain. The three great empires consciously withdrew their troops and didn't have any conflicts. Then, before the ancient sovereign came to Middle Domain, did anything strange happen to the three dynasties? Strange? The old man raised his brows, and then he put on a fake smile and said, The ancient sovereign is called strange after he came. The three great dynasties, which had been fighting for many years, actually stopped fighting at the same time. This is the most strange thing in the past 10,000 years. Got it. Hearing this, Star Sky Tablet slightly raised his eyelids. It nodded. In the next moment, it vanished like a starlight. HMPH. The old man gritted his teeth and finally turned around to leave. This fellow gave him the feeling that he was as unfathomable as the ocean. Since that was the case, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. The distance between them and the pill competition was getting closer and closer. He still needed to make some preparations. Your speed is a little slow. Being pulled by Kiera, they hurried forward. Seeing the sweat that was left on the former's pretty face due to anxiety, Xiao Yan laughed bitterly. With a flip of his wrist, he grabbed Kiera's hand and strode forward. In an instant, he was dozens of miles away. That direction? Ignoring the redness that surged onto Kiera's face, Xiao Yan spoke in a deep voice. The reason why he was determined to help Kiera was because he wanted to help her. Of course, Xiao Yan would. He also had his own plans. If he was lucky enough, he might be able to obtain the medicinal herbs to attack Kiera and her sister. West side. Kiera's small mouth trembled as she subconsciously said. Her hand was held in Xiao Yan's palm and she felt the temperature coming from it. It was as if the temperature was being roasted. Her face seemed to be about to drip water. The Heavenly Medicine mountain range was covered by a dense forest. A majestic spiritual strength surged out from between her brows and covered an area of dozens of miles. With the help of the flowing power spell, they arrived at a cliff in less than half an incense stick of time. Big Brother's aura is gone. Standing at the edge of the cliff, Kiera's eyes were dull. Xiao Yan lifted his eyes and looked over. The mountain had collapsed and it was a complete mess. Clearly, they had experienced a great battle. Even if he died, there should be a corpse. Kiera, can you feel his aura? His soul power swept across the cliff and did not find Qi Yang's corpse. Xiao Yan's expression suddenly became serious. A crazy idea suddenly appeared in his mind. It seems like some have gone in that direction. Kiera cried tears as she pointed in a direction. Boom! Xiao Yan pursed his lips and did not say anything. He grabbed Kiera and spread out the flowing power spell, flying towards the direction she was pointing at. If it was only for the sake of snatching the treasure, there was no reason not to see the corpse. In other words, the biggest possibility was that the enemy had taken Qi Zhang away. Refining puppets. When he thought of these words, Xiao Yan couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This idea spread crazily in his mind. He felt that his guess might be right. He didn't dare to tell Kiera about this idea. After a while, Xiao Yan's body suddenly slowed down. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the dense forest in front of him. A thin figure was moving quickly in the dense forest. In his hand, it seemed like he was holding a person. 1 inch, brother. Seeing the figure of the person being carried, Kiera could not help but shout out. Not good. Xiao Yan's pupils suddenly shrunk. Following the sound of Kiera's voice, the skinny figure, who had slowed down in the distance, suddenly shook. He stopped in the next moment. Xiao Yan raised his eyebrows. It was already too late for him to dodge. The former's aura had already firmly locked onto him. Where did this little devil come from? Is he here to die? The skinny figure in front of him turned around. A creepy voice also sounded. His sharp and cold eyes swept over. The old man's face was extremely repulsive. Half of his face seemed to have been burned by fire. Bones could be vaguely seen between his skin and flesh. His eye sockets were deep like that of a skeleton. His other face was no different from an ordinary person. However, the gaze that he revealed caused one to shudder. It's you, kid? What? You've called for reinforcements. He looked at Kiera, who was standing beside Xiao Yan. The old man gave a ferocious smile. Combined with his half-face that looked like a skeleton, it made people's hair stand on end. Let my brother go. Kiera's voice carried a sobbing tone. She had changed her introverted personality from before and spoke loudly to the old man. If it was not for Xiao Yan holding onto the old man's arm tightly, the little girl would have charged forward a long time ago. In the old man's hand, Qi Yang's face was pale and his eyes were tightly shut. He was holding her in his hand, and he didn't know what death was. Is he all right? Xiao Yan's expression was gloomy. He stared straight at Qi Zhang, who was being held in the old man's hand. He almost couldn't sense the qi of the latter. He had no idea whether Qi Zhang was alive or dead. He. The old man smiled coldly. He lifted Qi Zhang and punched him in the abdomen. The latter only trembled for a moment before showing no reaction. Now, I don't know if he's all right or not. Retracting his fist, the grin on the old man's face became even more terrifying. Damn thing. Xiao Yan's eyes turned cold. He looked at Kiera, who was crying by the side, and softly said, You stay here and do not interfere. Before Kiera could respond, Xiao Yan's body suddenly trembled and disappeared in the next moment. At the same time, the latter's heavy voice sounded, Xiao Ao, protect Kiera. All right. A figure flashed past. The Xiao Ao's expression was grave as it landed beside Kiera. It softly laughed at the latter. Don't worry. He will save your brother. Courting death. The old man's face trembled, and then he smiled grimly. A strange white flame appeared in his sunken eye sockets. The flame flashed and disappeared, but the space in front of him started to shake violently, as if it was being burned by the flame. Kai! As the space trembled, Xiao Yan was sent flying, and he fiercely stepped on a huge tree in the distance. When he looked at the constantly twisting space, he couldn't help but frown. A flame that can burn the spatial zone? This thought quickly flashed through his mind. Xiao Yan took another step forward and unleashed the flowing power spell, leaving behind a few afterimages. He had no idea where his true body had gone. The old man remained motionless like a mountain. Terrifying soul energy surged out from between his brows, wrapping the entire spatial zone in layers in an instant. Every single change of grass and wood was reflected in his mind. Your speed is quite fast. You can only hide and not dare to come out. He laughed coldly. In the old man's sunken eye sockets, white flames once again surged out, like dense white bones intertwining. The other intact eye socket of the old man was tightly shut, in the sunken eye socket. There seemed to be a gaze that rushed out. The space began to distort in an unstable manner wherever the gaze passed. Crack, crack. This entire space trembled. Xiao Yan had nowhere to hide. He could only reveal himself and stand on a huge tree not far from the old man. He looked at the former with a solemn expression. This dense white flame could actually burn the void. It was probably also a type of monarch flame. You don't know the difference between life and death. Seeing Xiao Yan's appearance, the old man revealed a strange smile. With one hand holding Qi Zhang, his body suddenly moved. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived in front of Xiao Yan. Hong! Their fists and palms collided. A terrifying origin Qi's whistling sound suddenly exploded, destroying many huge trees below. Xiao Yan leapt in the air and turned around. Only then did he manage to stabilize his body. Although it was just a simple exchange of blows, the old man's strength had clearly reached the heavenly sovereign. A heavenly sovereign level alchemist, this bone was not an ordinary piece of bone that was hard to chew. Since you are courting death, don't blame me for being impolite. The old man's laughter was deafening. He opened his 5 fingers, and a huge palm that seemed to cover the sky and earth appeared. Boundless origin chi surged in his palm, and in the next moment, it turned into an origin chi that covered the sky and the earth, and slammed down towards Xiao Yan. Profound cloud forbidden divine hand. It seemed as if the heavens and the earth were being stirred. The origin chi palm was covered with numerous mysterious lines. Each line of lines surged with the laws of the heaven. Compared to Lei Xingtian, the comprehension of the laws of heaven and earth was much better. Xiao Yan's spirit shook. He did not dare to hold back at all. The yin and yang fused with the origin chi crazily surged. It passed through his limbs and bones and gathered in his palm. The yin and yang origin chi wreaked havoc on his back. Facing the origin chi's giant palm, a roaring white tiger rushed forward. Behind the white tiger, even more so, the green dragon followed closely behind. Facing an enemy who had reached the heavenly sovereign, Xiao Yan had no choice but to hold back. The 4-spirit emperor technique and the yin-yang fusion origin chi were his biggest trump cards. Rumble. The stalemate between the white tiger and the hand seal only lasted for a moment before it shattered with a loud bang. Behind it, the green dragon turned around and flew upwards. The majestic yin-yang fusion origin chi continuously devoured the energy of the heavenly laws. In a short period of time, a vacuum area with a radius of dozens of miles had already appeared in this area. When heavenly sovereign-level experts fought, 100 miles of land would be turned into a land of deathly silence at every turn. The Xiao carried Kiera and stood in the distant empty space. A solemnness involuntarily surged into his eyes as he watched the fight below. He could tell that this old man's strength was several times stronger than Lei Xingtian's. The origin chi palm seal dispersed, and the energy of the azure dragon was also depleted. At the same time, it dissipated. The old man raised his head and looked at the scene. A cold expression emerged on his ferocious face. He does have some ability. As the old man spoke, he slowly closed his eyes. Within his sunken eye sockets, a thick white flame rose once again. Quietus Monarch Burning Flame. Next to the Xiao, the star sky tablet appeared out of nowhere. When it saw the white flame in the old man's eye sockets, it said in a low voice, "What monarch flame is this?" Hearing this name, the Xiao felt an inexplicable shock in its heart as it asked in panic. It can burn the space, and with the help of the heavenly Tao, its power might be even greater. To be precise, the flames of the top 18 monarch flame all require a heavenly sovereign or higher to unleash its full power. The star sky tablet's expression was solemn. As he spoke, he glanced at Xiao Yan, and the corner of his mouth slowly curved up. Although this guy has 1,000 leaves ancient monarch fire ranked 16th, in terms of its power, those few monarch flames combined might not even be as powerful as this quietus monarch burning flame. Now, this guy is in trouble. Quote, 0 inches a monarch flame that can burn the void. Could it be one of the top 10 monarch flames? The Xiao spoke in a frightened voice. Kiera, who was standing at the side, stared at Qi Zhang, who was in the elder's hand. She did not seem to have heard the conversation between the two of them. The quietus monarch burning flame is ranked 17th, and it was born from the void. It belongs to a kind of strange flame. In the ancient era, there was once a powerful being who possessed it, and it could burn a part of the world. It's incomparably powerful, but now, it actually appeared here. The star sky tablet shook its head and spoke in a soft voice. After that, it looked around and pondered for a moment. Then, with a wave of its hand, the star luo stone cauldron emerged from its sleeve and stood in the void. This battle is going to be great. We can't let anyone disturb us. As if mumbling to himself, the star sky tablet's 10 fingers moved slightly. It was unknown what kind of technique it had used. A fiery glow suddenly surged out from the star luo stone cauldron. The fiery glow spread and surged into the space. In an instant, the world returned to normal. However, if one were to carefully sense it, one would be able to sense that this space seemed to be isolated from the outside world. Thank you. Upon seeing this, the Xiao endured. He couldn't help but feel delighted in his heart. The star sky tablet had spoken many times before. Unless the heavens themselves took action, Xiao Yan's life or death had nothing to do with it. Although it didn't help the latter directly, this attack was of great help to Xiao Yan. The star sky tablet didn't know, but he remembered it clearly. Compared to the combination of yin and yang and the origin chi, the Star Sky Tablet was much more powerful. In terms of the Four-Spirit Emperor technique, the fusion of the 4 Xiaoyans and the 4-colored Fire Lotus was Xiaoyan's true trump card. If it was before, once the Fire Lotus was used, it would definitely alert everyone. But here, Xiaoyan could use the 4-colored Fire Lotus without any worries after abandoning all distractions from the outside world. The Star Sky Tablet sneered. It turned a deaf ear to the gratitude of the Xiao Ao and looked at the fight between the two men in the distance. The old man's soul force was so powerful that he could sense it the moment the Star Sky Tablet used its technique. His eyes suddenly turned cold, and he couldn't help but feel shocked in his heart. An existence that could control a part of the world had already far exceeded his imagination. Even amongst heavenly sovereign experts, he was considered to be at the peak level. "I am Btth2 from Fallen Dragon Cliff. May I know your name?" The old man opened his tightly shut eyes and spoke in a gloomy voice. He had automatically ignored Xiaoyan, who was standing in front of him. Xiaoyan had also sensed the changes in his surroundings. He was well aware of the Star Sky Tablet's technique. Although his expression remained the same, he was secretly grateful. Under such circumstances, there was no need for him to hide it. Even he had never seen the true power of the 4-colored Fire Lotus. He didn't know what effect it would bring to the old man in front of him. When he heard the old man introduce himself, Xiaoyan furrowed his brows. Fallen Dragon Cliff was one of the famous danger zones in the star field. According to the legends, there was a true dragon that fell from the sky, and that was how it got its name. Within it, heavenly beasts were running rampant, and poisonous miasma filled the air. He didn't expect that it would actually be the place where this old thing was standing right in front of him. "You don't need to know my name. Kill this guy, and you can leave as you wish. I will never interfere in this matter." Before Xiaoyan could say anything, the Star Sky Tablet's voice sounded out from nowhere. Xiaoyan was startled when he heard it. This old thing was trying to take his life. If the old man had used all his strength to fight the old man, he was afraid that he would display 120% of his strength now. "That's great." Btth2 laughed coldly when he heard this. After which, he looked at Xiaoyan, whose expression had changed. He violently threw Qi Zhang, who was in his hand, onto the ground. His 10 fingers were slowly clenched. There was a strange expression on his half-skull-like face. "Old thing." Xiaoyan could not help but curse. The old man had already charged forward explosively. His 5 fingers pierced through the empty space. They were like 5 sharp blades that cut through the sky. They carried a vast and mighty heavenly Tao force as they ruthlessly smashed towards the former. The origin Qi surged within this space, appearing to cater to Btth2. Xiaoyan's breathing was stifled. The prestige power spell vibrated, scattering all the pressure. He threw out the silent heaven fist. The yin and yang fused with the origin Qi, and the power of the heavenly Tao collided with a loud bang, causing the heaven and earth to buzz. Rumble. In an instant, the two of them had exchanged dozens of blows. Btth2 had the upper hand. The two of them didn't stay idle either. They kept attacking in secret. Btth2's soul energy was stronger than Xiaoyan's, almost touching the edge of the ancient stage's soul. Xiaoyan's soul force was only at the great circle of the illusion realm, and it was supported by the prestige power spell. He was barely on par with Btth2, and he wanted to rely on his soul energy to help him. It was just wishful thinking. Die. Btth2's expression was gloomy. His 5 fingers pressed down with a loud bang. The origin Qis from all directions gathered together like officials who were paying respects to the emperor. They roared wildly in the middle of his palm. In the blink of an eye, they had already transformed into a mountain that firmly locked onto Xiaoyan. With a loud bang, they descended. Desolate mountain seal. This was a genuine holy arts. It was displayed with the strength of a heavenly sovereign. It had reached the greatest extent and was supported by the power of the heavenly Tao. It seemed as if it wanted to shatter this space. The star Luo stone cauldron trembled gently in the sky. It was almost unable to maintain this space. Xiaoyan's body was covered in blood. The battle with Btth2 was dozens of times more terrifying than the battle with Lei Xingyun and Lei Xingtian. In Xiaoyan's knowledge, only the origin Qi of Kui Yu from the Deacon sect could compare with it. He raised his head and saw a huge golden mountain pressing down on him. In an instant, it landed on Xiaoyan's body. The force of thousands of kilograms pressed on his shoulders. Xiaoyan's chest tightened, and he spurted out a mouthful of blood. He had already used the heavenly monarch fire-burning body. Although his strength was comparable to a peak monarch cultivation, he wouldn't be able to exert the true power of the holy arts before he reached the heavenly sovereign. As a heavenly sovereign, Btth2 had a deep understanding of the heavenly Tao. It was far from what Lei Xingtian, who was just a half-baked expert, could compare with. Furthermore, he had also used the holy arts, which allowed him to kill any ordinary monarch cultivation with a single strike. Ha! Xiaoyan's sternum continued to crack. Both of his eyes turned red as he endured the immense pain. 4 monarch flames rose into the air. Behind him, a yin-yang twin fish diagram slowly appeared. Under the eruption of the monarch flame, the yin-yang fusion origin chi suddenly soared into the sky and shattered the huge golden mountain. Btth2 stood in the void. As the golden mountain shattered, his 5 extended fingers could not help but tremble. Blood flowed from the area between his thumb and forefinger. How dare you! His perfectly intact eyes suddenly closed, and a wisp of dense white flame once again appeared in his sunken eye sockets. The space where Xiaoyan was suddenly trembled, and a force rushed out, causing the former to groan and fall back involuntarily. Do you really think that you have the strength to defeat a heavenly sovereign? Btth2 grinned hideously. The thick white flames burned even more intensely. He moved his body and lunged at Xiaoyan. Hong! Xiaoyan's face turned gloomy. He steadied his body, he waved his hand, and 4 different colored flames appeared in his palm. He looked at Btth2, who was laughing ferociously, and his eyes suddenly surged with killing intent. Today, if you don't die, then I will die. One in the space isolated by the Star Luo stone cauldron, the Star Sky tablet, the Xiaoao, and Kiera were able to clearly see what was happening in the isolated space with the help of the Star Luo stone cauldron. One glance was enough to tell who had the upper hand in the exchange between Xiaoyan and Btth2. Throughout the entire process, Xiaoyan was basically suppressed. He only relied on the combination of 4 monarch flames and the yin-yang origin chi to not be defeated. The gap between a heavenly sovereign and a monarch cultivation was extremely obvious. The former grasped the strength of the heavenly Tao and was well versed in the heavenly Tao laws. He also had control over the holy arts and the monarch flame. It was far from what Xiaoyan could compare with. At this level, even if he was at the peak of the monarch cultivation. Although Xiaoyan was in a sorry state, the fact that he was able to persist until now still shocked Btth2. Do you think you are Sang Yu? Btth2's face was ferocious like a furious lion. The vast origin chi fell down and shattered the curtain of fire in front of him. Xiaoyan felt a sweetness in his throat. Facing the furious Btth2, he didn't have any strength to resist. He fell down and crashed into the ground. Although he had lived in the Fallen Dragon Cliff for a long time, he had heard about the major events in the starfield. Back then, Sang Yu used the strength of a monarch cultivation to confront a heavenly sovereign and defeated him. This incident had shaken the entire starfield. Even he couldn't help but go to the Sang clan to find out what had happened. Unfortunately, before he left, he heard that Sang Yu had once again gone to the battle domain. While sighing, he was also amazed by Sang Yu's monstrous talent. It was simply unimaginable that he could defeat a heavenly sovereign with the strength of a monarch cultivation. The power of the heavenly Tao and the heavenly Tao were the greatest suppression to any expert below the heavenly sovereign. As Sang Yu possessed the tyrannical heavenly king physique, his physique was rarely seen since ancient times. The power of the heavenly Tao and the heavenly Tao had no effect on him at all. This was the reason why he was able to do whatever he wanted. As for the guy in front of him, no matter how strong he was, he would never be able to compare with Sang Yu. Furthermore, he was not a heavenly sovereign who was defeated by Sang Yu. His soul power and monarch flame were enough to kill this kid with ease. Your soul power is pretty strong. This time, there aren't many people in the pill competition that can defeat you. You should kill him as soon as possible, and that means you have lost an unknown opponent. He stepped into the void and didn't see Xiaoyan coming out. Btth2 let out a cold snort and raised his head to take a look. Then, he looked down with his eyes tightly shut. In his hollowed eye sockets, white flame slowly condensed. In the next moment, a wisp of flame gushed out from his eye sockets. The flame turned into a skeleton, and wherever it passed, space trembled slightly as if it couldn't withstand the pressure. It seemed like it would shatter at any moment. Boom! The ground suddenly cracked open. Xiao Yan's figure soared into the sky. The white skeleton flame also arrived as planned. It opened its mouth wide and was about to swallow Xiao Yan. The terrifying energy that came from the flame was about to burn the entire world. Swoosh! 4 monarch flames circulated and transformed into a flaming armor around his body. He gently held the void with his palm. The crimson gold flame on the blue flame ruler surged and slashed towards the skeleton flame in front of him with a sharp force. Swoosh! A buzzing sound was heard. The thick white skeleton flame dissipated, but Xiao Yan was also sent flying backwards. Blood splattered all over the void. The gap between the two of them was too huge. Even Sang Yu could only flee in fear when facing Btth2. The mastery of the monarch flame and holy arts of a heavenly sovereign was not something a monarch cultivation could compare with. Even Xiao Yan, who had spent his whole life playing with fire, could not match up to them. Why doesn't he use the fire lotus? The Xiao Ao was alarmed. In front of Btth2, Xiao Yan actually didn't have much strength to resist. Even if he used all of his strength, he could only barely keep his life. On the side, Kiera was already sobbing silently. It was unknown whether Qi Zhong was alive or dead, but Xiao Yan was not Ji Wuxuan's match at all. This kind of scene made her heart ache. If anything happened to Xiao Yan, she would be plunged into endless guilt for the rest of her life. I understand. When he heard Kiera crying, Xiao Ao's heart suddenly trembled. Qi Zhong was still in that spatial zone. If he used the fire lotus, it would probably affect this fellow. You don't plan to attack? Swallowing his saliva, the Xiao Ao gritted its teeth and said. The Star Sky Tablet had been leisurely watching the battle that was happening in the isolated spatial zone. It had no intention of attacking. I've said it before, I won't interfere in this kind of matter. Hearing this, the Star Sky Tablet coldly harumphed, as if Xiao Yan's life or death had no effect on him at all. If it wasn't for you, Xiao Yan wouldn't have spent a lot of time in the heavenly medicine sect. In the end, he had no choice but to take the risk. The indifferent tone of the Star Sky Tablet had completely infuriated the Xiao Ao. The latter was furious. He pointed at the Star Sky Tablet's nose and cursed. It didn't matter what kind of sacred object it was. No matter how powerful it was in the past, it still looked like a coward now. Even the heavens wouldn't dare to go. It was entirely up to his character here. Did he really think that this was the era where his limelight was unparalleled 1,000,000 years ago? If it wasn't for Xiao Yan's revival, you would still be a few pieces of broken rocks right now. I don't know which corner you are lying in right now. But now, you are acting tough now? If you have the ability, just go to the heavens and make those protectors obediently lie down. What are you doing here? The Xiao Ao's eyes were slightly red, as if it had lost its rationality. What are you doing now? Let Xiao Yan compete with that old thing. Is this a beast battle? Whether you live or die has nothing to do with you, right? All right, you don't care about me. Let them come out. I'll go and help Xiao Yan. As he finished speaking, the Xiao Ao's expression became cold as he spoke word by word. Practicing also had to have a certain degree of speed. An alchemist who possessed a powerful spiritual strength and possessed both the monarch flame and the holy arts. An ordinary heavenly sovereign would not be a match for him, let alone Xiao Yan. This fellow had the mentality of watching a show. Are you done? Seeing that the Xiao Ao had calmed down, the Star Sky Tablet let out a cold laugh. Let me tell you, even without Xiao Yan, I would have been resurrected by someone else. This was a predestined event, and also the luck of the holy object. No one could stop it. Also, everything that has happened so far has been influenced by his actions. If it wasn't for this little girl, he wouldn't have ended up here. After saying that, the Star Sky Tablet's eyes swept across the isolated spatial zone. With a heavy voice, he said, "It's true that Sang Yu has the tyrannical heavenly king physique. He can defeat heavenly sovereign, but why can't Xiao Yan? You also know that Sang Yu has the tyrannical heavenly king physique? Do you know what the tyrannical heavenly king physique means? The heavenly Tao couldn't hurt him at all. What about this old thing? With the monarch flame and holy arts, even if Sang Yu comes, he won't be a match for him." The Xiao Ao was so angry that it laughed. Where's Xiao Yan? With just 4 monarch flame that can't unleash their full power and the yin-yang fusion origin chi? He hasn't reached the heavenly sovereign yet, so he doesn't have a complete understanding of any of them. That cultivation technique of his is enough. The Star Sky Tablet's eyes turned cold as he interrupted the Xiao's words. He said in a cold voice, "The tyrannical heavenly king body is rarely seen since the ancient times, but do you think that Xiaoyan's cultivation technique is just an ordinary thing? Even if it's unusual, how far can one master it before reaching the heavenly sovereign?" The Xiao coldly harumphed. He had already known that Xiaoyan's burning spell was more mysterious than a holy item, but with the strength of a monarch cultivation, how could he possibly use it? "You don't know anything, but you still dare to talk nonsense." The Star Sky Tablet's sneer became even more intense. "Let me tell you, listen up. This cultivation technique is the last step he needs to understand. This is his chance. Even the 9 disciples and the soul demon can't compare to the origin of this cultivation technique." At the end of his words, the Star Sky Tablet's face turned pale, and he gritted his teeth. It was as if he was enduring an indescribable pain as he spoke in a voice that was close to muttering to himself.